Second Peter chapter 1. We're still there. We're going to be there for a few more weeks as we are studying the habits of highly effective Christians. And the paragraph we're focused in on begins in verse 5 of 2 Peter 1. For this very reason, make every effort to add to your faith goodness, and to goodness knowledge, to knowledge self-control, to self-control perseverance, to perseverance godliness, to godliness brotherly kindness, and to brotherly kindness love. For if you possess these qualities in increasing measure, they will keep you from being ineffective and unproductive in your knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. Hence the title of How to Become an Effective Christian. But whoever does not have them is nearsighted and blind, forgetting they have been cleansed from their past sins. Today we come to habit number 5. Develop perseverance or spiritual endurance. The King James uses the word patience. Little girl Jan, 2.5 years old, was banging her teaspoon on her high chair, yelling, demanding dessert. And finally her mother had had enough, and she was headed downstairs to the freezer to get her some ice cream and just said, "Have a little patience." As Jan's mama gets back upstairs, she sees her little girl in what appears to be the middle of a seizure. Her face is bright red, her body is rigid, her fists are clenched, her eyes are fixed in a stare. She didn't appear to be breathing. Mama drops the ice cream and runs to her little girl and says, "What's the matter?" She unclenches her fists, exhales, and said, "I'm having patience." You ever been there? Or you would be if you could get by with it, right? On a more spiritual note, R.W. Dale, an English pastor of years gone by, was pacing back and forth in his office one day, and he was making so much noise that his secretary thought something was wrong and knocked on the door and said, "Pastor, what's the matter?" And he said, "I'm in a hurry, but God isn't." Yeah, we've been there too, where we've been in a hurry and God said, "You remember that verse about, a day being as 1,000 years? And we don't like to develop endurance, perseverance, patience. So we have been saying, add to your faith. It starts to faith. Make every effort, that's spiritual diligence we talked about. To add to your faith goodness, that's choosing the best. In order to know the best, we are increasing our knowledge. Add to your goodness knowledge. And since we don't always do what we know we should, last week we studied developing self-control. But we live in a microwave society, and we don't know a whole lot about perseverance or persistence or patience. Those of you who are my age remember how you used to make popcorn. You get the pan out and you put the oil in the bottom of the pan, and then the directions, and you can still find, I saw some the other day in the grocery store, you can still buy those big old bags of loose popcorn kernels. I don't know how long they've been on the shelf, but apparently there are people that don't have a microwave or something, and the directions say heat the oil until it begins to boil and drop one of those kernels into that oil, and when that kernel pops, the oil is hot enough to pop your corn. And then pour the kernels into your pan, cover the pan, and you had to shake it so it wouldn't burn. Did any of you wait until that oil was hot? You put the oil in the thing, you put the popcorn in the oil, and then you stood there and stewed because you wondered why your popcorn wasn't popping, and you shook it and you did all that kind of stuff, and finally, if you were lucky, you got some popcorn. Now, You get the bag out of the box, stick it in the microwave, hit 2 minutes and 15 seconds or however long it takes, and you've had your pop. People these days don't know the struggle we went through. But it's kind of indicative of our society. We don't ever want to stand over a stove shaking a pot for 5 minutes. We want to push a button on a microwave and let it do its job. There might be microwave popcorn, but there's no microwave Christianity. And there's no microwave maturity. And so Peter says, you need self-control. And you need self-control more than once or twice in your life. And so to your self-control, add perseverance, spiritual endurance. Take the long view. And I've told you several times through this study, but the reason I repeat it is because I realize that not everybody is aware of this. And that's not a dig, that's just a reality. You know, the Bible was not written in English. We think that the Bible was originally written in English. It was not. The Old Testament was written in the language of that day, which was Hebrew. The New Testament was written in the language of that day, which was Greek. And so anytime that a preacher stands up and says, this word in the English dictionary, no. You know, that's not helpful. You need to go back to the language in which it was written and study that word that was used. And we have the manuscripts to be able to do that. And the Greek word that Peter uses here that's translated in our English, perseverance or endurance, or in some translations, patience, means to expect, to wait for, to stand firm, and to endure. And what's interesting about this word is that it is used in two perspectives in the New Testament. It is used toward the world. And when this word is used in our relationship to the world, it means to stand fast, to endure. It has with it the idea of resisting wrong and staying strong. It's not being swerved from your purpose. It's staying true to God no matter what it's like in our society. Now remember that 1st and 2nd Peter was written during the days of Nero, who was not a friend to Christians. And Christians of those days were going through intense persecution, intense suffering. And so Peter says, you're going to have some endurance. But the second perspective that this word is used has to do with our relationship toward God. And that's where the part of the definition of waiting and expecting comes in. It has with it the idea of waiting on God to do what he's going to do. Now, Hebrews chapter 10, verse 36 says, you need to persevere, and that's the same word, so that when you've done the will of God, you will receive what he has promised. For in just a little while, he who is coming will come and will not delay. You have need to persevere so that you'll receive the promise. So again, look at this progression. Add to your faith, choosing the best. To choose the best, you have to know the best. And you need the discipline to do the best, and the self-control, and now the perseverance and endurance to keep doing what's right, even when we're challenged or opposed. I read of a boy who went and saw the movie Jack and the Beanstalk. And he went home and decided he was going to plant his own beanstalk. And so the next morning he got a lima bean from his mom and put it in the ground and watered it and waited. After 2 days, he wanted to see what was happening, and so he dug it up to see what was going on. Not much. He replanted it, and every day for a week he dug it up to see how it was coming. And finally, he just dug it up, stomped his feet on it, and gave up growing his beanstalk. You know, that's us, isn't it? Lord, I prayed this prayer. Have you done anything yet? Lord, I prayed this prayer last week. Have you done anything yet? Lord, we're kind of like that little boy, just keep digging up the lima bean. We need spiritual endurance Because not only do we need to trust God, but we need to trust the process that he uses. And sometimes my mind doesn't make that connection. Oh God, I trust you, but what in the world are you doing? We have to trust God and the process that he is using. And we need to remember that for God, the finish line is not next week. I used to have to tell myself the finish line is not when you say amen at the end of the service. That's not the finish line. The finish line is not next week or next month. The finish line is the end of the age. So take the long view. I saw this definition one time and it kind of struck me, so I put it in your notes. Endurance is not a long race. It's many short ones, one after the other. And I think that's kind of, we think about, no, it's not one long thing. It's a lot of short ones, one right after the other. So let's look at this quality, endurance, perseverance, first in our relationship to the world. And again, in this context, it has to do with resistance to the wrong. It has to do with staying true to God even when things are tough. And things do get tough. I don't have to take much time to remind us things get tough. And Christians are not exempt from the tough times. It rains on the just and the unjust. Whether that rain is a rain that brings a harvest and unjust people get a harvest, or whether it's a rain of a torrential storm and righteous people lose some things. And again, remember, Peter's writing to Christians who are going through some stuff. And let's be real. We make decisions every day in our area of obedience to God. Am I going to trust him in this? And sometimes we get discouraged because it seems that God isn't anywhere to be found. We try to do right. We try to live for God. We try to be ethical. And the heathen in the next cube gets the big promotion. We need to develop endurance. We put God first by tithing, and all of a sudden our car breaks down. We need to develop endurance. We decide we're going to read the Bible every day and have some prayer time every day, and it seems that all hell breaks loose in our families. I remember somebody coming to me one time and said, Pastor Ken, I made this commitment that I was going to pray, and it just seems like everything's going wrong. Yeah, because when you start to move toward God, the devil decides to come toward you. And we just need to understand, this is why Peter says, to your self-control, you need perseverance, you need endurance, because you need to remember we're in it for the long haul. We need to take the eternal perspective. In order to be able to do that, I believe, we have to, I don't know if master is the word, but we have to at least understand the second dimension of this word endurance, and that is in our relationship to God. Now remember, the definition, part of the definition of this Greek word is to wait on or to wait for. And that immediately brought to my mind the Old Testament concept of waiting on God. Because that's really what endurance is. It's what perseverance is. On the one hand, it's standing firm in your faith, but the only way you can do that is if you're waiting on God and have that connection with him. And so we're going to spend the balance of our time today looking at our relationship to God as it comes into why we have to persevere in our relationship with God. And it's got two sections. The first is to wait on God. And Isaiah 40:31 is the big verse. You know that verse. They who wait on the Lord will renew their strength, mount up with wings as eagles, run and not be weary, walk and not faint. And the definition of the word that Peter uses in the New Testament is the same concept as the definition of the word that is used in the Hebrew language in the Old Testament. Waiting on God, because God rarely, if ever, moves in our time frame. God said to Abraham, I'm going to give you a son and your descendants are going to be like the sands of the seashore. 25 years from the time he got the promise to the time Isaac was born. Joseph, you're going to be put in a place of prominence. 13 years through various kinds of testings before that was fulfilled. Moses spent 80 years in preparation for 40 years of ministry. Jesus took 3 years training his disciples, building their character. God doesn't move in a hurry. And so we need to develop the endurance and the perseverance that keeps our faith focused on him even while we're waiting for the answer. It means to have a sense of total dependence and complete confidence on God. And I've put the references in your notes so that you can, at a later date, do your own Bible study on this and expand on it if you want to. And I encourage you to do that. It's a fascinating study through the Scriptures every time that it talks about waiting on God. There are some promises for waiting on God. Because sometimes when we're waiting, we wonder if we're wasting our time. And so God gives us promises. Isaiah 49 verse 23, they shall not be ashamed who wait for you. Psalm 27:14, wait for the Lord, be strong, and he will strengthen your heart. Wait on the Lord. But what's interesting is, and I know I'm throwing a bunch of stuff out at you so that maybe you'll say, hi, that's interesting, I need to study that, is that Isaiah chapter 30 verse 18 gives us another perspective on why we wait. Because it says, therefore the Lord will wait that he might be gracious to you. While we're waiting on him, he's waiting so that he can be gracious to us? Why do you suppose God is waiting? Well, I think sometimes it's because he knows that we're not ready yet for what's getting ready to come. And that part of that is the process of maturing in our lives. I mean, you think about some of the stuff that you've gone through. You weren't able to handle that 10 years ago or 20 years ago. And he was waiting on us to be the best prepared for that. And somebody suggested God wants us to learn the joy of waiting on God, of knowing that he is our deliverer, he is the answer, he is our hope. And Lamentations 3:25 says, the Lord is good to those who wait for him. Somebody said, wait on the Lord, it's worth the wait. So how do you do it? Just let me give you a couple of principles here for waiting on God. Wait hopefully. Psalm 33:20, we wait in hope for the Lord. He's our help and shield. Psalm 130 verse 5, I wait for the Lord. My soul waits. In his word I put my hope. Psalm 62:1, my soul waits on God. From him comes my deliverance. Psalm 62:5, my soul wait only on God. My hope is from him. So as we're waiting, it is not a depressed, I'm just going to have to wait on God. No, it's he's going to do it. God is always up to something. Okay? Understand that. God is always up to something. He is always at work on your behalf. We don't always see it. We don't always know it. I remember one of my children was going through a very challenging time on their job. And it seemed like their boss was just keep putting more and more and more stuff on them. And they were having to be in more meetings and present before different people, and no more money or anything. It was just they had to do more work. And, I want you to go to this meeting. I want you to attend this. I want you to meet these people. And my child was frustrated. I don't understand this. And then a promotion came. And this is over like an 18-month span of time. A promotion came and the boss said, I couldn't give you a raise. There was no place for me to give you a promotion. But what I was doing is I was getting you in front of the people who could give you the promotion. And all these extra projects I was giving you, all these meetings you were going to, that stuff was getting to the person that gave you this big promotion. I'm sure he thought it'd have been nice to know now while this was going on. But God is always up to something. And I wonder maybe sometime when we get to heaven, he's going to say, you remember this and this and this? Well, here's why. Wait hopefully for him. He's always up to something. He's always got your best interest at heart. So wait with expectation. I can't wait to see how this is going to turn out. But to do that, you got to wait patiently. Psalm 37, be still before the Lord and wait patiently for him. And then David, because he knew what real life was like, said, do not fret when men succeed in their ways, when they carry out their wicked schemes, for evil men will be cut off, but those who hope in the Lord will inherit. Wait patiently for him. But there's another interesting twist to this concept when the scriptures also talk about wait for God. Waiting on God means, Lord, I depend on you. But then there are some things that we're waiting for God. Again, Hebrews 10:36, you need to persevere so that you can receive what he's promised. For just a little while, he who's coming will come and will not delay. So while we're waiting, the ultimate waiting on God is waiting on him to come back. But while we're waiting, what are some things we're waiting for? We're waiting for his teachings. Psalm 25, verses 4 and 5. Show me thy ways, O Lord. Teach me thy paths. Lead me in thy truth, and teach me. For you are the God of my salvation. I wait on you all the day. Part of what we wait for as we are waiting on God is we're waiting for him to show us what we need to know. Lord, show me your ways. Teach me your truth. Teach me how you work. We talked about this the last couple of weeks. You get spiritual knowledge by spending time with him. And as you wait on him, you're waiting for him to reveal things to you. We're not just waiting to wait. By the way, waiting is not passive. Waiting, I don't want you to get a picture of waiting on God being curled up in the recliner. That's not waiting on God. In fact, the Old Testament word for waiting and waiting on God was a word that was used for labor and delivery. Now, anybody that's given birth knows that's not passive and that's not lazy. It is pain, it is effort that is going to result, hopefully, in a good outcome. And it's fascinating that the Old Testament writers take that concept and say that's part of our relationship to God, is we're waiting for his teachings, not just laying back and say, okay, God, strike me with lightning when you want me to do something. But it's an energetic waiting. God, teach me, show me, let me know what I need to be learning. And we're also waiting, and I know you can identify with this, for God's deliverance from the tests and the trials that we're going through. Psalm 40, I waited patiently for the Lord, and he turned to me and heard my cry. See, again, to your self-control, add perseverance. Wait on the Lord, be patient with him, and watch him do the job. But here's the thing that I think we all need to understand. Sometimes we don't even know what we're waiting for. Have you ever been in one of those times in your life when you didn't even know what you were waiting for? It's like God's getting ready to do something, but I have no idea what it is. It's what David asked in Psalm 39, verse 7. And now, Lord, what am I waiting for? It's like my hope is in you, but what am I waiting for? Sometimes we don't know. There have been times in our lives in ministry where, one of us will say to the other, are you feeling kind of weird right now? Are you feeling kind of a restlessness in your spirit? And it's usually both of us, both Don and I, is like, yeah, there's something. There's something in our spirit, kind of restless. Like, is something getting ready to change? Is something getting ready to happen? The most dramatic illustration of that, we were really just feeling incredible restlessness. Like, God's getting ready to do something. Nothing happened for a year. And for a year, there was a sense of, God's getting ready to do a change. Something's going to happen. And after a year, we got a call to move to Augusta to pastor a church. Guess when that church got organized and started? A year prior to that. It's like God was saying, I'm getting you ready. I'm getting them ready in Augusta, and I'm getting you ready. Sometimes we don't even know what it is, but we just learn to wait. Even it's like, God, I have no idea what you're getting ready to do, but I'm waiting on you. And I'm waiting with hope, and I'm waiting with expectation, and I'm waiting patiently, because you really don't have much choice when it comes to God, right? And I'm waiting on you, because ultimately we're waiting for God to do what only God can do. See, if we could do it, we wouldn't have to wait. But God can only do what He can do. And it's Isaiah 64. Since the old times, eye has not seen, ear has not heard, it's not entered into the heart of man what God has prepared for those who wait for Him. So again, wait on the Lord. It's worth the wait. Because what ultimately we're waiting for is, God, I can't figure this out. I don't have the answer. I don't know what to do. I'm waiting on you. And I'm waiting hopefully and patiently and expectantly. I'm waiting obediently. Show me what I need to be doing during this period of time. Because the ultimate wait is for His return. That's what we're ultimately waiting on. For Him to come back and receive us to Himself. 1 Thessalonians 1:10, wait for His Son from heaven. Titus 2 says we're looking for that blessed hope, the glorious appearing of Jesus Christ. Because ultimately, the anchor of spiritual endurance is that we know who holds the future. I said earlier, take the long view. Take the eternal view. We can hope because we do know how the story ends. Don't forget that. God's going to put us here as long as He wants us here, and He has work for us to do as long as He has us here. But we know how the story ends. You don't have to worry about it. It's easier. I don't mind spoilers when it comes to sports. Because if my team loses or the team that I hate wins, I ain't gonna waste my time watching that. If I want to know how it's going to end up, Brian thinks I'm crazy, and probably some of y'all do too. I see you shaking your heads. But there are times if I don't care about any of the teams, those times I'll just watch it for the joy of watching the game. But if it's something I care passionately about, I want to know how it's going to end up, before I decide if I'm going to waste my time on it or not. Well, I know how this is going to end up. I know that God is victorious, and every knee will bow and every tongue will confess, and He is Lord. And that's the core power of spiritual endurance. knowing that God is God, and this same Jesus is going to come again. And that gives me endurance, and that gives me hope. And so he says, add to your self-control perseverance, waiting for what only God can do. I read of a lady who was diagnosed with a terminal illness, and she'd basically been given 3 months to live. And her doctor said, you need to start making preparations. And so she asked for an appointment with her pastor to, go over, her final wishes. And she went over and basically planned her funeral. These are the songs, these are the scriptures. This dress over here is what I want them to put me in, all these different things. This is my favorite Bible. I want that to be in there with me. And when he got ready to leave, she said, wait a minute, I forgot one more thing. She said, I want to make sure that you bury me with a fork in my right hand. And he said, wait a minute, you talking about silverware? I said, yeah, a fork. Why? She says, well, I've attended church dinners where food was involved. And my favorite part was when they were clearing away the dishes, they would say, keep your fork. Because that meant dessert was coming. Something better was coming. And when they said, keep your fork, that meant something good was getting ready to happen. And if they said, keep your fork, that meant it wasn't going to be Jell-O. It wasn't going to be pudding. It was going to be cake or pie or something with substance. And so I want people to walk past my casket and see me with that fork and ask, why in the world does she have that fork? And then I want you to tell them, because something better is coming. So keep your fork. Something better is coming. Someone better is coming. And we can endure. We can persevere. We don't have to be like little Jan, and clench our fist and hold our breath and stamp our feet, having patience, because we know who's coming. And we know how it's going to end. But while we're waiting, we serve him, we worship him, we trust him, and we're going to play a song by John Waller. If you watch the movie Fireproof, it's from that movie, I believe, and it's called While I'm Waiting. The link will be in the comment or description section. And I want you to listen to this song to remind us while we're waiting, keep trusting God. Now may the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face to shine on you and give you his peace now and evermore. Amen. Thanks for tuning in.